Firstly, of course, a belated 4th of July wishes. This is the most important 4th of July in my life. Um, I was born in New York, raised in New York. Don't hold it against me. And but to be alive on the 250th anniversary of the United States is a very, very special honor. So praise God. And let me tell you, last night when the rain and the wind came through, I was praying for the young kids of Oklahoma not to get electrocuted by lightning strikes because they were out setting off those firecrackers, in the middle of the storm. And this morning, also, firecrackers were going off. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to answer questions which I know you would like to ask. And I wanted to say that we are the most blessed generation in the last 2,000 years because we are witnessing more and more of God's miracles than ever before in the last 2,000 years. And I believe that Messiah is around the corner, first time or second time. For me, it doesn't matter. Excuse me for saying it. What matters for me is that you all stay alive. What matters for me is that you all be alive when the Messiah is here. And the miracles that we have been witnessing in the last 3 years especially show that we are in the messianic time and that the Messiah will be coming very soon. Again, I'm challenged by the clock, but I have to tell you, one of my messages is that there is going to be a Holocaust in the United States. God is going to create pandemonium for a reason. And the reason is we are in a battle between God and Satan. And I have been given a 3-year jail sentence in Switzerland for saying that Allah, the God of Islam, is not the God of the Jews and the Christians. Allah is Satan. Allah is Lucifer. And there are many things that I hear in the synagogues everywhere in the world where I go that the Jews say, oh, we're closer to the Muslims than we are to the Christians. That is one of the greatest lies ever in Jewish history. And I'm going to be talking about that as we go. I've been speaking in Christian churches now, over 1,000 churches in 35 years. I've written 7 books. I have 2 new books in Dallas being printed right now, and I hope to be able to bring them in 2 weeks when they're finally printed. So I'll find a way to make sure the books are here in Oklahoma City. Prophecy Watchers usually sells my books, and I'm going to be doing some shows with them. What I will not be speaking about, because we just don't have time, is the war with Turkey, the war with Egypt. These 2 countries are preparing for war with Israel. They are waiting for Israel to be weakened by the wars that we are in now. And my book about Turkey is called Lepanto II, Turkey and the Armageddon. And my contention is that Turkey is the Armageddon. Lepanto I was the tremendous sea battle in 1571 in which the Holy Alliance of Catholic navies, Spain, Genoa, Vienna, Genoa and Venice, they were outnumbered 3-1 by the Turkish Navy, the Ottoman Navy. They sank the whole Ottoman Navy. And the Turks were at the height of their power, but they lost that sea battle. And they demanded that the Catholics rebuild the entire fleet. 1571. This was 17 years before the Spanish Armada. Now, Spanish Armada, you all know, because the Protestants whipped the Catholics. But 17 years before, the Catholics whipped the Turks. And this was the beginning of the downfall of Ottoman Turkey. I'm predicting in Lepanto II that Israel, the Greeks, and the Greek Cypriots together are going to defeat the Turks on Cyprus, and the Turkish Navy is going to be sunk. But that's going to spark an Armageddon war, which, by the way, the Turks are going to lose. God is going to be in control. I have a lot of details in the book. It's coming out in a few days. And then my second book, for those of you who have never met me before, I have been fortunate, blessed by God, to form a Judeo-Christian political party in Israel running for office. Our elections are around October 26th, and the elections are going to be, hopefully, the opening of the doors for Christian candidates in our parliament, in our Knesset. My Knesset candidate list, we go by lists and proportional representation. Christians and Messianics in Israel today are about 6 to 8% of the population. Out of 120 members of Knesset, that means we should have 6, 7, or 8 members of Knesset just from Christian votes, which would propel the party into power, hopefully together with Netanyahu. I think it's absurd that we have Muslim candidates in the Knesset, 10 of them, and no Christians. And the Christians, that's because the Christian community in Israel is very new. The Greeks and the Catholics, they're about 2%, but the Russian speakers, Ethiopian, Amharic speakers, are about another 6%. So I think that we will be seeing Christian representation. I think it's totally hypocritical for us to say we're a democracy and to have our enemies in the Knesset, the Muslims. And I don't hate the Muslims, but they are the enemy. And Christians who are married to us, serve in the Israeli army, pay taxes, and vote, there's not one Christian in the Knesset. So I'm hoping this will be historical, and you will see in another 2-3 months what happens. And if we don't get in, there's another election, and another election, and we're going to keep plugging until my vow to God to create the party and lead the party and get us into the Israeli government will be fulfilled. What I want to do now, I want to explain a little bit about the Holocaust. Not the Holocaust past, the Holocaust future, though there are many parallels, many similarities. And I have to tell you, because I don't want to have false humility, but for 35 years, I've been speaking basically from a position of I'm nothing. I'm just one person. And I was driving up the West Coast on Interstate 5, across the border into Canada, and I spoke 10 hours in a farmhouse, 3 nights. And then I drove up to Edmonton, and I spoke in a Northern Baptist church in Edmonton. You all know the difference between Northern Baptists and Southern Baptists. Northern Baptists go to hell. I did not tell that joke in Canada, let me tell you. That's a Texas joke. Maybe Oklahoma also. And my hostess, my Christian hostess, called the local rabbi and said, we have this Israeli army spokesman, Avi Lipkin, and Christians give him 10 hours to speak. And in Canada, I spoke 10 hours. And would you like to have him for the Sabbath? He said, sure. So I went over, and he said to me, what's a nice Jewish boy like you doing in Christian churches? And I said, well, you know, we're 5 million. This is in 1999. And the Muslims were 1.5 billion. And if we had 100 million born-agains on our side, that would help to level the playing field. And he said, you know what, you're right. That's a good idea. I never thought of that. And then he said, well, you know, as a good rabbi, I would never step in a church, he said. But if you go to churches, God bless you. So I spoke. Then after the service, Saturday morning, there was a meal, and I got up to speak. And all of a sudden, I hear heckling. And 2 liberals with a capital L. You know the difference between liberal with capital L and a small L. Liberals are the true people who listen to anyone, but capital L are communist socialists. And they won't listen to anything except what they want to hear. And they were heckling and heckling. I didn't speak. And a Christian lady who was attending the Orthodox Jewish synagogue on Shabbat, every Shabbat, because Jesus Christ didn't go to a Southern Baptist church. He went to the synagogue. And you want to know about Jesus? Go to the synagogue. It doesn't matter. Just Jesus was a Jew, as you all know. And this Christian woman wanted to know about Jesus the Jew. Good Christian woman. And she went to church on Sunday, synagogue on Saturday. It's kind of like me. And so this lady gets up and says, if Avi agrees, let me speak. So I said, okay, they're not going to let me speak, so you speak. So she said, I am a civil servant in the province of Alberta. Alberta, Edmonton. And I'm a caseworker for an Egyptian Muslim woman doctor. And she received asylum here in Canada. She's hiding. She has 24/7 Royal Canadian Mounted Police protection. What's her story? She was like Mother Teresa in India. Mother Teresa dedicated 99 years of her life to the poor people of India. And this Egyptian Muslim woman doctor was doing basically the same. She was in her 40s, not married, and people had no money to pay her. And they brought their eggs, cheese, pita bread, but nobody had any money. And she was 40-something, and she said, you know what, I'm going to move to Canada because at least in Canada I can make a living, have some kind of retirement. In Egypt, I'm going to die very young and in the poorhouse. And she applied for a visa to Canada. And let me tell you, in Egypt, everyone knew who she was. And the Canadians immediately accepted her as a very renowned humanist doctor. Good Muslim, prayed 5 times a day, went to the mosque. And by the way, there are good Muslims. And she applied for a visa. It was immediately approved. And the next morning, there was a knock on her door. 3 holy men from the mosque in Cairo came to her house and said, congratulations. She said, thank you. You should also have congratulations. Why do I have congratulations? Because we know you're going to Canada. And why do you have congratulations? And they said to her, because you're going to work for us. And she said, what does that mean? And she said, well, when people come to your clinic, and you'll be the most popular doctor for Jews, Christians, and Muslims in Edmonton, Canada. And when someone comes to your clinic, they give their names, their addresses, their telephone numbers, place of employment, address, telephone number. And you'll know who the Jews are in Edmonton. And you will know who the Christians are, especially those who love the Jews and love Israel. And you're going to put everything on a computer and give it to us. And when orders are given from the Middle East, the Muslims of Edmonton will kill the Jews and Christians in Edmonton. The Muslims in Toronto will kill the Jews and the Christians in Toronto. The Muslims in Vancouver. And let me tell you, I used to spend a lot of time in the summers. I suffer for Christ in Canada in the summer. And I suffer for Christ in the winter in Florida and South Texas. So she said, listen, you see me in the mosque. I pray 5 times a day in the mosque. But I swore the Hippocratic Oath to heal people and save lives. I don't understand politics. I'm not interested in politics, and I'm a doctor, and I'm totally dedicated to saving human lives and feeding the poor, like Mother Teresa. And they said to her, oh, so you don't want to work for us? And she said, no, I don't want to work for you. So standing next to the doctor was another woman helping her in the clinic, and these 3 holy men grabbed the volunteer in the clinic, pulled out a knife, and they slit her throat. And they said to her, this is what's going to happen to you if you don't work for us. The next day, she was in the Canadian Embassy in Cairo, and the Royal Canadian Air Force flew in a private jet to pick her up and bring her to Edmonton. And this Christian woman in the Orthodox Jewish synagogue was telling this story. And by the way, that synagogue was attacked by the Muslims a few months later. The Muslims know where the synagogues are. I don't know if you ever heard the story about, I don't know if you remember Hannity and Combs, but Combs had me on his show once because he heard a story that I said that I quoted my wife. My wife was an intelligence gatherer, and she picked up a broadcast that the Muslims have their spies in every church in America. Now, of course, that's not true, but they follow very closely the more Christian, the more radical churches, including the ones I speak in. And they know every church. They know every pastor, and especially pastors who have the courage to stand with Israel, stand for Christ. These are people who are a danger to Islam. And then this Christian lady who was taking care of the doctor said to me also, she works at the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and they said to her that 10% of the Muslims are terrorists in America. 90% are good family people, Muslim. They believe in Islam, they want to make the country Muslim, but they're not terrorists to kill. I don't know if Pastor Dan remembers, but when I spoke in Yukon many years ago, I was told by 4 policemen that the Muslims are armed here in America. Their friend, these 4 policemen had a friend who was sheriff in Tulsa, and the alarm went off in the basement of a mosque in Tulsa, and the police showed up, and the whole basement was full of machine guns in the mosque. And they called the FBI, and the FBI said, oh, you can't touch them. They have licenses for their weapons. And I picked up information that, like in the New York Times, why do the Muslims have guns in America? Because they fear that the Christians hate them. So this is a plan which is building up. 10% are terrorists, 90% at this stage are passive Muslims. I don't know how many Muslims there are in America. I don't think anyone really knows. But the plan extends to America as well. My estimate, there are 30 million Muslims in America. If 10% are terrorists, that's 3 million. And they're out to kill the Jews on Saturday and the Christians on Sunday. And this is a very politically incorrect message. And there are very, very few courageous pastors like Pastor Dan who will have me speak and say this publicly. And it's getting more and more dangerous because the gatekeepers of this country are all bribed. I'm saying very terrible things. Very, very few people want to say this or believe it. So if you have 6 million Jews in America and 3 million Muslim terrorists, and the number is growing and growing, and the Jews don't want to hear a word I'm saying, because America is the greatest country club in the world for the Jewish people. We've been here 400, 500 years. America has only blessed the Jews. America never killed one Jew. So you can understand that 3 million Muslim terrorists are a threat to 6 million Jews. Another thing, Jews hate Christians till we marry them. So for 6 million Jews in America, there are about 4 million Christian spouses and relatives, children. Might go to church every Sunday, but they have one Jewish grandparent. And according to the Jewish law, they're entitled to move to Israel. My political party is saying to the people in Israel, our population today is 10 million. Very soon, another 10 million, I hate to use the word white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Jews, are going to be moving to Israel. Reform, conservative, unaffiliated, with 4 million Christian spouses. Now, Jewish people always say, oh, it's terrible, our children are marrying out. But why does God allow Jewish people to marry with Christians if it's such a bad thing? Maybe God has a plan. maybe the Messiah is not going to show on the Mount of Olives only for the Jews or the Christians, but for everyone. And we're very short on soldiers. Our ultra-Orthodox students, 70,000, don't want to serve. We have 100,000 left-wing socialists. You know, we got that sickness in our country too. They don't want to serve. But I know our best fighters are the Christians when they come and marry to Jews, and they're more patriotic than the Jews themselves in Israel, the Christians. And our population will double, God willing. So I'm going to fast forward. My story about Canada was 1999. It's all in the newspapers of Canada at that time. 5 years ago, there was a sad incident. You all heard of George Floyd. And George Floyd was on drugs. And I don't know the exact circumstances, but the policeman's knee on George Floyd's neck choked him, and he died. I went for lunch with a neo-Nazi. I didn't know he was a neo-Nazi. I just knew he was a militia. And who listens to me, especially in the South? It's the militias, Tea Parties, Republicans, Democrats. Never invite me. They don't want to know what I'm saying. And they don't believe in God. But I'm saying there is a God. And we are going to be seeing a confrontation here in America, which might lead to a civil war. Because tomorrow, God forbid, you know, there have been 3 attempts to kill Trump. I voted for Trump 3 times. One bullet kills that dear president of ours. There's going to be a civil war in America. The Democrats are itching for a civil war. And we right-wingers, Jews and Christians, are itching for stability, peace, love, God's will. You know, if China tomorrow invades Taiwan, whose fault is it? The Jews. If there's a collapse in Wall Street, who's responsible? The Jews. Every bad thing that could happen in this country, the Jews will be blamed. I'm saying very crazy things right now. So I had a meeting with this neo-Nazi, and he said, "What do you think about the killing of George Floyd?" And I said, "Well, it was a tragic thing. He should have been in a hospital, you know, getting rid of the drugs." He looked at me like that, and then he said, "What do you think about defund the police?" I said, "Well, that's horrible. Defund the police, you're going to have chaos and killing and crazy things going on in the country." And he shook his head no. And he said to me, "When the time comes, you know, our militias before George Floyd were 3 million in America. Today our militias are 30 million. Because if there's no police, you're going to have militias. Everyone's armed and ready." And then he said to me something I'll never forget. He said, "And the first thing we're going to do is to kill all the Jews in America." And he was a totally interesting person, very intelligent. And I said, "Listen," I said, 2/3 of the Jews vote Democrat because it's a Democrat tradition to vote for universalist cosmopolitan parties. 1/3 of the American Jews vote Republican, 2/3 no. And you're going to kill all the Jews? So I pushed back from the table, excused myself, and left the table. So I want to give you 5 minutes, I'm watching the clock, and to explain to you how many people want to know why the Jews vote Democrat? And I'll explain it to you. American Protestantism is exceptional. Now, when you speak to a Jew about Christians, immediately the Jews think about Russia and the pogroms, Russia and the persecution of the Eastern churches, or the Catholic churches, the Inquisition, expulsions, the Crusades. We have a very, very unfortunate history with the European Christians. And praise God, I was born in America. Praise God, I was raised in America. And I always loved America. But Jewish people don't go to church. I get into trouble. I say to them, you Jews, my Jews, you should go to church on Sunday, Protestant churches. And they said to me, oy vey, he's a Jew for Jesus. I said, I'm not a Jew for Jesus. If you go to church on Sunday, you're going to meet the people of America who are Protestant and they genuinely love us. Rabbis won't let me speak. And Pastor Dan lets a Jew speak from the pulpit. Something exceptional about America. I've been in 1,000 churches. So the American Jews don't go to church on Sunday. And they say to me, we don't go to synagogue on Saturday. What do you mean you want us to go to church on Sunday? Do you remember The King and I? Getting to know you, getting to know all about you. When you get to know the Christians, you are overwhelmed by the love that the Christians have for the Jews. And yet the Jews have this reticence. They keep thinking of Russia. They keep thinking of Germany. They keep thinking of the Spanish Inquisition, the Catholics. But if they don't go to Protestant church and don't meet the people and don't hear the pastors preaching, they don't understand, get over it. You're in Texas now. That's a Texas thing. And then I say to the Jews, you need to read the New Testament. Oy vey, he's a Jew for Jesus. I say, no. They say, well, we don't read the Old Testament. Why should we read the New Testament? I say, because if you don't read the New Testament, you don't realize the New Testament is a Jewish book, written by Jews, for Jews, but it's written for all of humanity. I spoke in Switzerland in 2009. I was invited by the EDU, Christian Political Party, and I got a 3-year jail sentence because I said Allah is Satan, Lucifer, the devil, not the God of the Jews and the Christians. And Islam is not a religion. Islam is a criminal psychosis bent on the destruction of the entire human race. They kill the Jews on Saturday. They kill the Christians on Sunday. My wife is from Egypt. She taught me this. And you ask any Christian from Egypt or Arabic countries, they'll say, yeah, they kill the Jews on Saturday. They kill Christians on Sunday. They kill the Hindus. They kill the Buddhists. They kill the blacks. 5/6 of the human race has to die so that 1/6 will then go ahead and kill each other. Because the Shiites kill the Sunnis kill the Shiites, all in the name of Allah. And when Muslims pray, they yell out, Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than whom? Greater than the sissy, wimpy, peace God and love God of the Jews and Christians, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because the God of Islam is based on a moon god, war god, and sword god of Arabia. And the Judeo-Christian God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it appears 7 times in the New Testament, is a love God and a peace God, seen as a wimpy God. Why is Allah Satan? Because if he wants to kill every human being on the face of the earth, including the Muslims, we are all in the image of God. God loves all his children. God loves the Muslim kids too. He doesn't want them to die. One of my favorite sayings in Christian churches, bring them to the Lord or they will bring you to the sword. That does not translate into Hebrew or Arabic. So this is a battle to save the human race. This is not only about Israel. This is not only about America. I have a very short time left. What I want to share now is that we have seen such miracles in the last 3 years. Israel was founded by socialists. Then there was a massive immigration of non-socialists, but the socialists have always remained in control. The, the socialists believe, now this is important for you to understand, because the Democrats in America, not the Jews only, everyone who is left, they believe in something called the solidarity of all the nations. And I spoke in Moscow in Russian, because I studied Russian, and I did an interview with Radio Moscow in 1994. And I said, Russia should be an ally of the United States and Europe and Israel and defeat Islam. You have been fighting the Turks for 1,000 years. And, you know, the Russians, they have this dream. I don't want to say it's a crazy dream, but they want to take Istanbul. They want to take Constantinople back because it's part of the Eastern Roman Empire, which the Russians believe they've inherited. So there has been this never-ending war of 1,000 years with the Turks. And the interviewer was a communist, and he said to me, we believe in the solidarity of all the nations. You know, I have to tell you, after World War II, the Europeans were saying, you know, we European white Christians are all crazy. Why have we been slaughtering each other for 2,000 years? I'm not talking about the Jews. I'm talking about white European Christians killing each other in Europe. And so they started, excuse expression, thinking, and they said all these wars in which white European Christians are fighting each other, this is all because of religion. This is all because of the Bible. This is all because of Jesus Christ. And it's one of the reasons why Christianity has been suffering so much in Europe. And the Jews think the same way. Because for the Jews, it's more convenient to say, we don't want war. War is because of God and the Bible. And many Jews broke away from religion altogether. These are the Democrats here in America. But if they went to Protestant church every Sunday, in addition to the Saturday service in Hebrew, they would learn something. And Israel is lost without the Christians. We have to have the Christians with us for Israel to survive and to prosper. Think about it for a moment. Our population will grow from 10 million to 20 million. 20 million overnight. And the Christians will play a major role. And my political party, the Judeo-Christian Bible Bloc, will become the biggest party in the Knesset, if I'm still alive at that time. And if I'm not alive, whoever takes over will continue. The socialists, I'm looking at the clock, the socialists want peace above everything. So they say to the Arabs, we'll pull out of Gaza in 1949. We pulled out. And then we had to take it again in 56, and we pulled out in 57 because of American politics. And then we took it in 67, and Ariel Sharon pulled out in 2005. We're back in Gaza again. And there's a term that all of you know in American schools called manifest destiny. No matter how many times we surrender, no matter how many times we give back land after we were attacked, and then we have to defend ourselves again. Same with Lebanon. This war in Lebanon is our fourth war in the last 40, 50 years. And people are saying, oh, Israel has to go back to the international borders. But then what happens is Hezbollah, backed by Iran, comes right down to the borders and attacks us again. Like, how stupid are we? You know, we have a group in Israel called the Druze. I don't know if you ever heard of the Druze. They are the children of Jethro. And there are Druze in 4 countries. There are Druze in Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. And every group of Druze in each country, they are loyal to the country in which they live. And the best soldiers in the Israeli army, they're Druze. So before the 67 war, the Israeli general staff gave orders to the Druze officers to go up to the Golan Heights and tell the Druze of the Golan Heights, which was Syria, stay where you are, don't leave. You will be protected. And the Druze stayed. The Shiites of Syria left. The Sunnis left. But many of the Druze would not take Israeli citizenship because the Druze of Syria were fanatically loyal to Hafiz al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad, father and son. And the people in the Golan Heights, they had their relatives in Damascus and in Syria. And then, as you all know, terrible civil war. I write about it in my 7th book, the wars between the Shiites and the Sunnis. And then the Turks came into the picture, and the Turks backed Ahmed Shara in Damascus, the Turkish-backed dictator. And immediately, they started attacking the Druze because the Druze were the backbone of the Syrian army fighting the Sunnis. Oh, this sounds very complicated. When you read my books, everything falls into place. And so the Druze of the Golan Heights and the Druze of South Syria, especially in Suwaida, well, I know a lot of these names don't mean anything to you. You've got to read the books to understand the whole history. Now, all of a sudden, all the Druze in Syria, Lebanon, and Israel want Israeli passports. Because nobody else is going to defend the Druze. They are going to be annihilated if the Israelis don't defend them. And that's God's will. They're descended from Jethro. I mean, we're looking in history of 4,000 years with the Druze, with Jethro and all his family. I could give you a whole hour lecture just on the Druze and things in the Bible that nobody pays attention to. And so today, we're attacked by Hezbollah terrorists. We cross the rivers, Litani River, other rivers there. You know, we're in a whole lot of places now in South Lebanon for the 4th time. Like, when will we ever learn? And the Israeli army took all of the Mount Hermon, which is very strategic. And the Druze are begging us, stay with us, don't go back. What is it called in American English? Manifest destiny. Our borders are now from South Lebanon to South Syria, all the way to the Iraqi border. And we're about a 3-hour drive. You ever hear of the Euphrates River? Isn't that in the Bible? Our borders will extend from Lebanon to the Euphrates River. It says also our borders will extend from Lebanon to the Great Desert. Now, there was no Saudi Arabia in those days, but that's what it is, Saudi Arabia and Yemen. And it's one of the reasons why 10 million Jews and Christians from the West will be moving to Israel to settle those areas. And this will be the kingdom of God. This will be Messiah's kingdom. And what we're doing is we are preparing the way for the Messiah's kingdom when we have millions of Christians moving to Israel together with their Jewish spouses. This is not a coincidence, brothers and sisters. God has a plan. And if you learn the Bible, you know God has a plan. And you know who my worst enemy is? The Jewish mother. You know why? Because the Jewish mother wants her kids really close to her, especially on the Sabbath. There's something in Florida, they say, Jewish mothers want their children a golf cart's ride away. And what is Avi Lipkin saying? We're going to have our Jewish brothers and sisters all the way up to the Turkish border and all the way to Iraq, all the way to Euphrates. I'm going to conclude with one last thing. Each subject requires an hour or two. I have on the table DVDs of Jim and Penny Caldwell. I don't know, anyone heard of Jim and Penny Caldwell? They spent 12 years in Arabia. And they found the real Mount Sinai in northwest Saudi Arabia. It's not in the peninsula in Egypt. And Mohammed bin Salman, who is the son of the king, is building a city there where the real Mount Sinai is, to turn it into a tourist attraction, to attract money from Christian and Jewish tourists who will be brought to Saudi Arabia. Now, you know what the problem with that is? Jews and Christians are infidels in the eyes of ISIS. ISIS is there. And ISIS is going to kill the prince and his father and the whole royal family and create the caliphate to prevent Jews and Christians from coming to Arabia, because that goes against Islam. Remember my words. There's going to be a showdown in Arabia, and the royal family will be destroyed by ISIS. And then they're going to attack Israel. You Christians are not our best friends. You Christians are our only friends. And we are friends and brothers and sisters in the name of the Messiah. And so I want to bless all of you and to thank all of you. I don't know, I know that, Pastor, how much time do I have? Because I'll just ramble on and on. But I don't see the clock flashing, so. Normally I need 3 hours, 5 hours to get the message out. Everything today was abbreviated. And all I can say is that I'm very, very happy that God has kept me alive. I almost got killed a few times in the army in Israel, a few times in traffic accidents. I had a heart attack and a stent. And God says, shut up and stop complaining. You have work to do. And so I'm just doing the best I can for as long as I can. You can pray for me and for us, because we have our elections in Israel on the 26th of October. And like I said before, if we don't get into the Knesset, it's not over. I have 2 new books coming out. They're going to be translated into Hebrew and Russian. Those books will get us the tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of votes that we need in Israel. It's not easy after 2,000 years of Catholic and Eastern Orthodox hatred of the Jews, for us to wake up and for everyone to wake up and realize that Messiah is coming for all of humanity to Jerusalem. And I'm very optimistic, and I thank you very much. And thank you, Pastor.